General, when we were in Baghdad last week, with all the briefings and all that we got, the impression that I got was that Tal Afar would be a tough fight. There were about 2,000 ISIS fighters in and around the city. So, I mean, what happened? What happened with those fighters since it obviously was sort of encircled? Where did they, did you kill all 2,000? Sort of how was it swifter than, why was it swifter than you thought? And then I have another follow-up on Syria.
Yeah, I remember our discussion a week or so ago here in Baghdad. I think what I said is we estimate there's somewhere between 1,000 and 2,000 fighters in Tal Afar. Quite honestly, our initial battle damage assessment is over 1,000 enemy fighters killed or captured already. Probably 500 to 700 of them in the neighborhood of Tal Afar city itself. And then those remaining fighters withdrew from Tal Afar city to the north. And they withdrew some 10 or 20 kilometers to some pretty rough country and some small villages to the north of Tal Afar. And in that process, we think we've killed somewhere between 300 and 500. So somewhere between 1,000 and 1,200 enemy fighters we think that we've killed. The Kurdish Peshmerga have estimated they've killed somewhere between 130 and 170 fighters trying to flee through northward and northwest through the Kurdish defensive lines. So there was a pretty good isolation around Tal Afar, and the Iraqi security forces and the coalition went there to annihilate the ISIS forces that were there in Tal Afar, and I think we've done that. I think there are probably some still hiding in the very rough country to the north of Tal Afar, but not in large numbers would be my guess. And I think we've accounted for a lot of them.
And just to follow up on this ISIS convoy going into eastern Syria, I mean, I get that sort of it's within the law of armed conflict to strike, if it's ISIS fighters and not necessarily hit the convoy. But the criticism is that morally, striking a convoy with 300 women and children just to sort of make a point, because they can obviously go around where you struck, is not the correct way to go about doing this. So if you could sort of tell us the rationale on why you decided to, temporarily sort of block this convoy with women and children.
Okay, so first of all, this is a convoy of ISIS fighters. We believe some of them have their family members with them. These are ISIS fighters that the Syrian regime cut a deal with to move through Syria from their western border with Lebanon, through Syria, and put them off on buses on their eastern border next to Iraq. That's what they're doing. So we decided to go look for these buses, and we found them. And let me make it clear, we have not struck this convoy at all. No women and children have been harmed on this convoy, although I'd very much like to get at the ISIS fighters on that convoy. We've resisted that. What we have done is we've seen the Syrian regime bring these ISIS fighters with their machine guns, which they posted on social media, pictures of masked terrorists on Greyhound-like buses with their machine guns in their laps. And you can check it on social media and see it for yourself. So we didn't make a deal with ISIS, and we're going to pursue ISIS wherever we find them. So they stopped near Abu Kamal in the eastern part of Syria and along the border with Iraq. And they waited to link up with ISIS. And so we watched, and when ISIS came out to link up with them, we started striking ISIS. And again, we haven't struck the convoy. But we have struck every ISIS fighter and or vehicle that has tried to approach that convoy. And we'll continue to do that.
Thanks to Joe.